Good day, everybody. It is Calxiyn here, and if you guys enjoyed this video, you guys should go ahead and subscribe for more videos like this. And so we are doing an Avatar discussion. So full disclosure, we are recording in June. I think the last episode of Avatar comes out sometime in August, like my reaction. So this should be August times. It's not as bad as Full Metal Alchemist, which we recorded today, which is like, this is in December.
This is going to be lovely for Christmas.
So we are recording ahead of time, and as you guys can see, I have Hunter over here with me. I have Arnold over here.
Oh, really? You're over here, and Hunter's over here.
No, I'm here,
and then you're here.
That's how you guys are on my screen. But yeah, so we're going to be talking about Avatar. Which I finished. Yeah, and so I think I explained this in the Full Metal one, which people are going to be confused if quarantine's over by December, but obviously if you guys are seeing this in August, like, I doubt the world has changed too much, so that's why we're doing this way, and I'm very excited.
Because I live in the US and you guys live in Canada.
Well, yeah, but you know what I mean. Like, we're, you know, social distance Avatar discussion.
We have to have our video cameras 6 feet apart, too.
So, I guess the first thing is that I'm going to talk about, like, my whole thing, like, with Avatar, and then you guys are going to explain, like, when you first watched the show and all that stuff.
I feel like I should preface this by saying years ago, I told you to watch Avatar. Just like years ago, I told you to watch Ruby, and then years ago, I told you to watch Code Geass.
So, Hunter's the reason why you have any...
What I'm saying is that I'm your tastemaker for anime.
Well, it's funny because it always starts like that, isn't it? Like, Al told me, like, when Al and I, like, were very close friends, like, in the Form Wars days and the days of internet, like, role-playing forums and all that. Like, he told me, Kaylin, you should watch this anime called Code Geass, and I was 12, and I was like, no. And then, all these years later, Al and I are gonna do the Code Geass talk. Maybe we can get Hunter in on that, because we haven't recorded it yet. The Code Geass talk, and, like, Al's like, yeah, I fucking told you so, right? Like, after all these years, like, I was probably 14 or 13 when he told me to watch it, and now I'm fucking 20 years old. And Al is just like, here, like, see, and we're still close friends, obviously, but I don't know, it's just funny how the world works. And so with Ruby, same thing. I was like, this looks stupid. And that's the same thing with Code Geass. I was like, everyone is lanky, and the art style is weird, and this looks fucking dumb. Right? With Ruby, I was like, I don't like how this looks.
What's wrong with lanky? I take offense.
Yeah.
With Ruby, I was like, I don't like how this looks. And with Avatar, it wasn't really a how it looks thing. I can't remember. Hunter, what was the reason I gave you for not wanting to watch Avatar? Because I don't even remember.
Right when we first started doing videos together, I was like, the show's really good. You could totally do a thing for it. Because that was around the time that Korra, the sequel series, was still coming out. So I was like, you could do a whole thing. It still worked now that it seems like they're doing a live-action remake with...
and Avatar just had, like, a resurgence because of Netflix. It's on Netflix now.
In the States. Us Canadians have had it for a couple of years now on Netflix.
Oh, wow.
But yeah, the resurgence of Avatar and all that.
I forget what it was. I feel like I don't know if you rewatched the first episode, but you can tell that more recently we'd been reacting to this season, but like the first episode we did together was like a year before we did all the other ones.
Yeah.
And it was me, like, we found a rip of it on YouTube or something, and it was like, come on, Cal, watch this show. It's really good.
And so... Sorry, Arnold.
No, go on.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, because, like, there was a point where we had done things, like, not as a request, but it was as this thing where people voted, and here's the mess that we got ourselves in. This is why I did, like, 4 fucking long anime at the exact same time, because, like, it was a top 3 or something, and so I was gonna do the top 3 anime. And so it was Little Witch Academia, Your Lie in April, like, all of these shows were on a poll, and then I just felt bad because one of the shows got left out, even though it was top 3. I was like, oh, well, I'll just do this other one, and then somewhere along the way, like, Geass got added to that, right? And so it was one of those things where it was like, because my original shows were Your Lie in April, Little Witch Academia, Avatar, Full Metal, and then I think sometime later, Geass got added to that sort of roster, and so, like...
I feel bad for those other shows.
Like Full Metal... And, well, I finished those, right? But Full Metal and
okay,
Avatar, it was sort of a fight for me to continue them because they were just so fucking long, right? So I think that I did the first episodes of all of those so people could sort of vote on what they wanted to see. And then eventually we sort of were like, okay, let's get back into Avatar. And Avatar and Full Metal together was still a very big undertaking. But that's how it all sort of started. So there's a very big divide from us watching the first episode and then us getting into it consistently. The nice thing about this talk is that Hunter watched the first 2 seasons with me. And we did discussions with those. We're still gonna do an overall discussion today, but
first and some of the 3rd season. I think
some
the
of the
beginning
3rd,
half
yeah,
of the 3rd season.
and then
Yeah.
quarantine.
Yeah, so I grew up watching Avatar on Nickelodeon, like when it originally aired. So I watched like when I think I watched all the 3 seasons like when they aired. So I watched the first episode when it aired in North America, and so I watched season 2 and season 3. And then Korra, I only watched up to season 2 because after season 2 they took it off of Nickelodeon and they put it on the internet, and I didn't have consistent internet. Like I didn't really have like the internet or even a computer in my house until I was like halfway through high school. So I kind of fell off of being able to watch it, and I've never since then I've never watched season 3 or 4 of Korra, and I know Korra's done now. But yeah, I grew up watching Avatar. I've seen so many people's like reactions and discussions on it since then because it's like a really great show. And yeah, it's kind of like in the same vein, like because we talked about Full Metal. It's kind of in the same vein of like one of like whenever I hear like great like anime or animation shows, it's always like Avatar and Full Metal are always in that conversation.
My history is really similar to yours, Arnold. Like I watched it on YTV, which is the Canadian Nickelodeon.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
When it first came out, I never finished it when it was first airing. But when I first got Netflix, when I was maybe when I was like 14, I watched the entire thing. I've seen Korra. I've seen the M. Night Shyamalan live action movie.
God.
I've seen that too. I've seen that too.
I've read the comic books, man. Cal, you need to see that movie. It's on Netflix.
I
want
thought
to
you
be
meant
in
the
the
comics. No, not the movie. If we
so
hit a
bad.
specific Patreon goal, then I will watch it.
You should pay. Like you should definitely be paid to watch that.
Yeah, I need to be paid. I will not watch it for free.
I've tried to watch it twice. The second time I was successful because I had someone else in the room. The first time I literally could not do it.
How
because
long
it
is
was
it?
just me. It's only like 2 hours.
I'm gonna need like $400 an hour. I'm not even bullshitting you. Like to watch that, I'm gonna need $800.
But yeah, I'm like a diehard Avatar fanatic, like lifelong.
I feel like I'm gonna be that by the end.
I've never read any of the books, so like I was actually really salty about like the big one of like Zuko's mom.
We'll talk about that because I was fucking heated, bro. But yeah.
You read him?
No, like it being teased in the
being,
very last episode.
I mean, it being like addressed throughout the show, especially like with Zuko's like, you know, that's always been like a point of his of like his strife with his family. It's like, well, whatever happened to his mom? Was she dead? Is she, you know, he found out that she was banished. It's like. And like all the visions and dreams that he's had, like and stuff like that, and like the visions that like Azula has with the mom too at times, like that. Oh, you never loved me, or you always thought I was a monster, and all that. It's just like, you're never gonna find out watching this, by the way.
Yeah.
So if you're ever questioning, or if you ever think that we're gonna answer that, you're dead ass wrong. You're gonna watch the whole show, and then you're gonna buy the book to find out.
See, that's
when you read the comic books, it'll be super weird.
That's the only thing that to me prevents Avatar from being a masterpiece. Like it's still like, listen, it is a 9.9. Like it is almost the highest.
Really? But that's isn't that so badass though? When he's like,
attention should never be considered like perfect. It should be considered. It is a masterpiece. It is worth your time.
I know it is. It is. But I'm saying
you can still be a 10 and not have that.
If Full Metal is like a 9 for me, like a 9 somewhere, right? Or even an 8, like an 8.5. If it's somewhere an 8.5 to a 9, Avatar is like a 9.5 to like a 9.99. Like it is so close. It was so fucking close to being perfect, but it left that one thread. Like that is the only thing in the entire show that is left undealt with, and that makes me so upset. And like, I know there was supposed to be a 4th season, but somebody told me that like they got greenlit for the 4th season, and they were like, well, we already have the comics, so we're done. And I'm just like, no!
No, they would have gotten greenlit, but instead of greenlighting the movie, Nickelodeon shifted to doing what they thought was going to be a series of movies directed by M. Night Shyamalan, which ended up being one pretty disastrous.
Yeah, I've just read so many things, and I'm just so sad, man. Because somebody did tell me, like, oh, well, the reason why season 4 didn't get made, like, they finally were allowed to do it, but then they already had the comics, and they were like, let's do something else. Let's do the movies, and that just makes me so mad. Because I feel like Avatar needed that. Avatar needed the 4th season. Like, looking at the comics, I know that...
animated the books that they did.
I know, like they could have...
So simple.
Why did they just animate the comics?
Not even that necessarily, because if we're talking about the 3rd season, there's this kind of awkward middle with the 3rd season, is that after, the failed invasion, I feel like that could have been the end of book 3.
Yeah.
And they've added more stuff throughout it, because I love the show. I do think season 3 feels weirdly rushed. Yeah. Like, I feel like or not rushed in that it's inadequate, but that they could have spent more time.
They could have, yeah.
Yeah.
And then you could have had, like, after the Zuko finding them and being Aang's fire teacher, and them finally defeating the Fire Nation could have been all of season 4. Alternative.
Or even, like, most of season 4, and then we would have had Zuko's mom time after. Because I love the ending of Avatar, but I needed that, man. Like, I needed that. Like, I feel like what they could have done maybe is, like, have that scene, then have the scene with Aang and Zuko where they're talking to all of the people, like the Earth Kingdom people, the Water Tribe, like all that stuff. And then, before that ending with Iroh in the tea shop, they stick Zuko's mom stuff in there, and then we get the happily ever after all that is done. I don't know if that would have been...
I mean, they gave a whole episode to, like, Katara's mom revenge episode.
Yeah.
And, like, and Korra did a couple of good, like, flashback, like, 2-parters. I think that would have been a great...
And I know that would have been kind of weird, I guess, because, like, seeing the ending, like, the ending is so good, like, together, but at the same time, like, that's my one problem with the show. Like, I think, well, 2 things. Like, the first episode didn't really convince me to watch it. Like, the first couple episodes of Avatar, I was not on board, but it's better than being not on board in the middle, like I was with Full Metal, right? Because at least it only took me a couple episodes, and I was like, okay, I'm totally on board with Avatar, whereas Full Metal, I was on board, and then I was like, stop this train, let me off, I don't want to watch this, right? So at least with Avatar, it was better, right, in that way.
Before we go any further, what kind of bender would you be?
Me?
Yeah. I've taken the online classes. I'm water, apparently.
You've taken the quiz. I would say, if I got to pick, I think I would be a firebender, to be honest.
That seems about right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think
the level of, like, mania and aggression of a fire bender.
Yeah, I think it would be either water or fire for me. Like, I feel like there's no in between. Like, it's one of those two.
Earthbender.
Nice. Earthbender?
Yeah.
Well,
right, so we got
the
a whole
gang's
squad.
all here. We got the whole squad, right? But yeah, I that's my one problem with the show, is that the first couple episodes don't really convince you to watch it. I think it's like the first 2 or 3. Like, after that, it's okay. And then the Zuko's mom thing, where it's like, please buy our comics, and I'm like, no. I mean, yes, I will, because I have no choice, but like, that pissed me off.
Yeah, it feels like too much of a side story that, like, if we took all that time to go and find Zuko's mom, it would have felt like, hey, aren't we, especially in the last episode, it's like...
Yeah.
Hey, do we have bigger fish to fry?
Yeah, it would have felt vestigial.
I know.
About to be taken over?
But I feel like, because I remember when we were watching it, Hunter, there was that episode where we saw Zuko's mom, and I'm like, oh my god, Zuko's mom was banished? Like, are we gonna find her? And Hunter was like, Calxiyn, please do not expect them to follow this plot line, because they fucking won't. It reminded me a lot of, like, when, I know this is a weird comparison, but, so Arnold's on Dunby Stars, so, like, no spoilers for him, but it reminded me a lot of when Arnold was like, Calxiyn, like, are they gonna follow this murder plot? And I was like,
Yeah.
No, don't expect them to continue looking at that this season, because apparently they're not going to, right? And so that's what it reminded me of. Like, Kaylin, please do not expect them to talk about Zuko's mom, or you will be disappointed. And I feel like that helped me level my expectations, because at least with Avatar, it was nice to have Hunter be realistic with me about what to expect, whereas Full Metal, everyone was like, 10 out of 10, it's a masterpiece. Like, nobody prepared me for certain things that would be disappointing, whereas Hunter did prepare me for, like, you're not going to know about Zuko's mom, it's in the comics. And I was like,
so here's my thing. I was not, so you can go if you want.
No, I was just gonna say regarding the Beastars thing, like after she told me that, it kind of gave me a chance. It made me be able to like focus on the other stuff instead of always having that in my mind.
Yeah, like readjusting your mindset, right?
Yeah.
Just with the disappointment, I think it's when you learn what happened to Ursa, Zuko's mom, it's really weird, but I was disappointed with that.
With
like
the
actual answer. Not that it was bad, it was just really, really weird. With the actual show, I kind of liked that ending, because it left you with kind of like that giddy feeling of like, oh shit, the adventure's not over.
Yeah, like, I like that too, that like you can imagine the characters still going
the adventure's over.
Stuff.
The adventure isn't over. You'll just never know. You'll just never know it.
Yeah, exactly. I guess. I don't know. It does leave people's imagination, but sorry, Arnold?
Because that's the only book that I know of is the one with Zuko's mom. Aren't there other ones too?
There's one with Katara being a pirate. Yeah. I don't think that's exactly what she's doing, but I saw her riding on the water, so that's what I thought.
There was one called The Promise, which is about the direct. It's actually really good and surprisingly mature about the Fire Nation colonies moving out away from the Earth Kingdom. Then there was The Search, which was about Zuko's mom. There was also like a bunch of like the pirate one. Yeah. There were a bunch of comics that were just weird one-off adventures where like they become pirates or like detectives or whatever. I haven't read those, but the other two are really good. If a little weird.
Yeah. Nice. I totally do want to check them out, but yeah, that's my only problem with the show, I think. I also think that, if we're talking about season 4 theoreticals, I think that they totally could have given Azula some type of redemption arc, but we'll talk about Azula specifically. We'll talk about that. But I guess what I want to talk about first, it's weird because, like, obviously, like, Hunter and I did season 1 and 2 discussion, so I don't want to necessarily get super into the plot. It's going to be more like the characters like the Full Metal one was going to be, but I think it was very fascinating, because I guess to talk about Zuko, you have to talk about what they did, right? Zuko was an antagonist, but he was never the villain of any of the books, right? It was the commander, the Dai Li, and Azula, right? And then it was the Fire Lord, right? It was always there was always another person that was worse than Zuko, and Zuko sort of, he was always sort of a third party, right? Because he saved Aang that one time with the blue mass spirit, and he had all this stuff going on, and it was really fascinating to see the plot of season 1, how they sort of weaved in the commander, even though Zuko is presented like, hey, he's hunting the Avatar, the commander is there to be like, oh well, I'm the real bad guy type of thing. And every book sort of had that. I think the plot was I think it was all really great, like how everything tied together and how all of the books went, I
think Zuko is just such a wonderful example of a redemption arc.
Yeah.
And I think he's kind of like the golden standard of like, how you do
Zuko's just the best character, like the best ever. He's just the best character ever.
When I think redemption too, I think Kingdom Hearts. I think Riku.
Yeah, Riku.
Because I feel
like
he's very similar, and like he was never like a villain. He was just like very misguided, and he kind of earned his spot back in the story
agree.
On the good guy side, so to speak. And I think he's the best character in Kingdom Hearts, regardless if he's not the main character.
Yeah.
And
that's
I think
the
same way about Zuko. Yeah, that's exactly the way I feel about him.
I feel like Zuko is the golden standard. Like Riku and Zuko, those are what I think of when I think of the best redemption arcs. We just watched She-Ra, and I don't think Catra's was bad by any means. I think Catra's was all right.
Similarly quite good.
Catra is quite good, but Zuko is just like, I see why everyone brings Zuko up, because while watching Ruby, to bring up Ruby, I guess. Everybody loves to be like, oh, Cinder's like Zuko, and I never really understood where people were getting that from.
It's the goddamn fire maiden
It's the
powers.
scar.
It's the scar, and it's
And
her,
so-
like, it's like, oh, she's been dishonored by Salem. She has to get her honor
When
back.
people have said, I want Cinder to pull a Zuko, I never understood that because I hadn't watched Avatar, so I was like, okay, whatever. But now watching Avatar, I can say with certainty is that Cinder has fucking nothing on Zuko. Okay, I see where people are drawing the similarities, but Cinder is never gonna be a Zuko, okay? There's just, I don't know how to explain it. There's nothing as likable about Cinder as there is about Zuko.
It's like I feel like what they're trying to say is I want to like Cinder as much as I like Zuko.
Yeah, exactly.
I don't think it's them saying like, oh, she has all of the qualifications to make her as much of a satisfying character as
agree.
Zuko.
They want her to become a Zuko, basically, or they want her to get the Zuko type arc, but I don't know. I see where people want it, but I'm like, she just, I don't know. There's just such a, like, Zuko's up here and Cinder's up here, like, you know what I'm saying? Or Cinder's down here. Like, there's just such a big divide, and so I get it. That's what people want, but I don't think so. I don't think so.
What works so wonderfully about Zuko is that you see you understand immediately that, which unlike Cinder's just bad, you're never given like the impression that there's something else there. With Zuko, immediately it's like, okay, this kid has daddy issues.
Yeah.
Like, he's not really angry at the Water Nation or at Aang. All of this is just a redirection for his angst at his father.
And you get a lot of scenes where he does the good, the good stuff, where he is the blue spirit, where he fights off these bandits in this town.
Zuko alone is one of the best episodes.
Zuko
in the
alone,
series.
like, that's when I finally saw, like, oh my god, like, Zuko's fucking, like, that's when that's when it all made sense. Like, you see Zuko be a normal person and live a normal life and be a good boy and a giant dork and all these, like, he's just so cute sometimes and all those things. And so, I feel like that's really, really different. Like, you need the foundation to show both sides of that character. And I feel like, again, not to shit on Cinder, but Cinder has given us nothing like, hey, like, Zuko here. Like, Zuko's just such a massive nerd sometimes, and he's just so dorky and cute and all that stuff. Like, there's a lot of likable things in him that you see when he is acting like a normal fucking person instead of acting like a maniac,
What's also really great about Zuko that I think is underappreciated is that it's not like he realizes the error of his ways and immediately becomes good. I think it's more realistic than that, because you don't immediately change your ways. You have small moments of like internal discrepancies and self-denial, and you see that peppered throughout the first 2 seasons and the first half of the 3rd season really well, where he almost does the right thing, but he screws up, but he keeps on trying to recenter himself.
Like with
the Azula scene.
I was about to say, like, once his sister showed up, he was just like, all right, now I'm on her side. And Katara's like, what the fuck?
Yeah.
I thought we were good. Like, what the hell are you doing now?
It's sort of like, I know this is a weird comparison, but I feel like I read this somewhere. It's kind of like being an alcoholic or like having an addiction. You know what I mean? Like, you're gonna fall back into it a couple of times before you.
I need that Zuko.
Oh boy, before you succeed, if that makes sense. You're gonna relapse, right? And he relapses sometimes into being a bad person, but ultimately he does the good thing. That scene with Azula, and then even at the palace, like, he feels so conflicted, and then he finally clicks for him,
I feel like his morality is tied to his hair. Like, the more hair on his head he has, the nicer, like, the more...
Well, he had hair before. It was just tied up in the ponytail, right?
Yeah, I know.
The more shaggy his hair gets, the more pure his soul. There's a direct correlation.
And definitely, though, like, all of the sort of outfit changes have some representative stuff. Like, Azula. Not Azula. Azula too. Azula gets a haircut. We'll talk about her crazy in a minute. But like, Katara changes hair. I don't think Toph does. Sokka has some hair moments, right? And so it's like, I don't know. It's very like symbolic. It's very Mulan too. That's what Zuko reminds me of sometimes. It's just like, I don't know.
Zuko is Mulan.
Like, I don't know, just with the haircutting
and
part.
Uncle Iroh is his Mushu.
God. With the haircutting part. Azula, when she looks in the mirror and she cuts her hair when she's going crazy, I was like, when will my reflection like, that's all I was thinking about. But yeah, Zuko's just such a fucking good character, man. I love Zuko. I I have a major crush on Zuko. If I was a kid and watched this show, I would have a major crush on Zuko. Like, Zuko is in my, like, Lelouch, Legacy, Cat Noir
he's
circle.
in your,
you know what I mean?
Yeah, the 4 pillars there.
He's in the 4 pillars. And, like...
At least, unlike those guys, Zuko is, relatively speaking, an alright guy.
Yeah,
in the end.
By the... but yeah, I love Zuko, man. I could talk about how much I love Zuko all day. And I definitely see, no spoilers for Arnold, because of My Hero, but I see why people are like, Todoroki, Zuko. Like, I feel like Zuko I feel like Zuko as a character in existence has just changed how pop culture sees, like, again, the redemption arc, but also that's definitely, like, I don't care what they say, Todoroki has definitely been influenced by Zuko, and I feel like the creator did say that. I feel like that's a fact. So yeah, I don't know, he's had such an effect on the world. I feel like all of Avatar has, but I'm like, good on you, Zuko. Like, you know, you changed how people see characters and how characters have been written since Avatar. I truly do believe that.
Want to know one of my favorite Zuko trivias?
Sure.
What?
Is that the actor that plays him, Dante Bosco, is in a movie from the 90s called But I'm a Cheerleader, and it's a comedy. It's a comedy about gay conversion therapy. It stars RuPaul and Natasha Lyonne, and so you can hear Zuko run around in a scene when he's trying to escape it in like a thong or whatever, screaming, "I'm gay!" And it is an amazing. I'm surprised no one has turned that into like an
never heard about that before.
Avatar animation,
I'm sure they have. You know what I did see? I saw Azula and Zuko, but bop to the top, and it was obviously still like Sharpay and Ryan's voice act, but that was so funny.
Yeah.
Like, I just loved that.
Yeah, I remember that.
I love when the voice actors
really isn't Sharpay, isn't she?
I love when the voice actors do stuff. I know this is like kind of off topic, but I guess Katra's voice actor from She-Ra read a story on Instagram or something. Like, she read Rapunzel, and so you have like this an animation of like Katra like reading Rapunzel to like She-Ra and her children and stuff like that. It's really cute. Cool. But yeah, I would pay Zuko's voice actor just to say like so many lines. Like, I just want to hear so much from him. He's just
whisper
so
sweet
cool.
nothings.
Yeah, whisper sweet nothings. But yeah, we love Zuko in this house. I think he's definitely my favorite. I will talk about Zuko and Katara a little bit during this discussion, but
again.
I'm saving that for its own YouTube video. Like, but I'll talk about it a little bit. But yeah. So Zuko's pretty cool. I think we should.
The titular avatar.
Huh?
I feel like we
talk about the main character.
Oh, I was gonna go to Azula, but we can talk about Aang if you guys want to.
It's called Avatar: The Last Airbender.
I know, but I was starting like.
Yeah.
I was starting with the most, I don't want to say interesting, but like Full Metal, we did Ed and Alphonse at the very end, so that's what I was thinking.
Okay, sure.
Let's talk about Azula, okay? Azula went fucking batshit at the very end of the show, which I was not expecting at all. Like, she cuts off her hair and she's like staggering, and it's very, very somber. Like the fight between... She vanishes
like everybody.
Yeah, like the fight between her and Zuko was very, very sad. Like with the music that's playing, like it's supposed to be this epic fight, but it doesn't feel epic. Like the music is not epic.
I mean,
the music is sad. It's an epic fight, but the music does not give the vibe.
Yeah, the Agni Kai.
Oh, that scene is so amazing.
It is amazing. Yeah. It's just a very sad scene, like as opposed to it being, you know, like battle music, right? It's very much like sad violin noises, you know? And so I think Azula was interesting because I don't remember when they introduced her. I don't think it was season 1. I think it was season 2.
I think it was season 2 when like her brother fucked up initially.
At the end of it's at the end of season 1 she appears.
Oh, okay.
And during earlier in season 1, when you see when Zuko gets the scar in the background, you can see Azula.
Yeah.
Okay, that's interesting. Yeah, so
I think she like shows up on a boat or something.
She obviously didn't come out of nowhere, but like I didn't really, like, you know.
That's like the Whitley thing. I didn't know Whitley existed either.
Yeah, it's sort of like you think Zuko's an only child by the way that he, you know, talks and axe in the first season, but then Azula comes in. And it's interesting because she is straight up sort of a psychopath, but I also feel really bad for her. I don't know, like there are moments where she seems like she could almost be human, and those are some of the worst moments, like feeling-wise, like great moments in the show, but some of the worst things to sort of feel like conflicted over her, and I see where she could have gotten the redemption arc if she wanted it. And so that's what I sort of wanted to talk about. But like, I feel like she loves people in her own way. Like, I feel like she did like May and Ty Lee. You know, I feel like she did like them.
When they abandoned her.
Yeah, and so, you know, to see all that, like, Azula is fucking crazy. I think she's a really good antagonist. I think her lines are really good. I think how she interacts with Aang and that she's the one that does a lot of damage to him. It's interesting, too, because you get... I don't want to say, like, a sexism thing, but you have this scene where, like, Iroh sends Zuko a sword or something, and then it's like, here, Azula, have a pretty doll, you know, and that she was sort of treated like, you know, because she's a princess, and so you don't necessarily, like, expect her to want to go out and murder people. Like, that's something that is reserved for, like, Zuko should be the one that's doing that, but then it's Azula. So that's very interesting, too, is that I think at the beginning you have this sort of vibe where, you know, nobody's treating Azula seriously because Zuko is supposed to be the one that is the heir, but then Azula ends up proving herself. And it's also like Zuko is a bit more of a mama's boy, but there's this bond that isn't there between mother and daughter that I think Azula is also jealous of, and I think they kind of go into that. Like, you didn't love me, like, you love Zuko more than me when she's talking to the mirror.
Yeah.
So it's really interesting, like, how those factors come into play, like her development, I guess, like, you know, sort of being treated like, here, go like the girl things, and then not having that connection with her mom, and all that stuff. Like, I feel like that definitely probably contributed, and then I feel like she was probably already a little predisposed to be crazy. She got the crazy genes, you know? And so I think the first time where she ones up Zuko, when she shows, like, hey, like, I've learned more firebending, that is the moment where she realized she can't get validation from her mom, she can't get the validation she wants from Iroh, but if she is better than Zuko, she can win the love and affection of her dad. And I think it's a grandfather, actually. I think it's a grandfather before he, like, gets murdered. Like, she impresses the grandfather, and then that changes, I think, how her dad sees her, and that's sort of, like, where everything topples down. Because that's what Azula and Zuko want at the end of the day. They want their father's love, and Azula did that through being crazy, and Zuko kind of did that also by being crazy, but Azula is a different brand of crazy, right?
Yeah.
I wouldn't go so far to say she's a psychopath. What I think she is, like, remember in the show, she's 14 years old.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like,
she's a teenage sociopath.
I always forget that. Yeah. I always feel like these characters are older than they actually are.
Mm-hmm.
So really, she's a child trying to get love and affection the only way she's been told is possible, which is through conquest and violence and manipulation.
Yeah.
So when that's the only thing available to a child, especially, it's inevitable that she would come off like that, have those serious issues. Yeah. Which is why I think that had hypothetically, like I agree with you, Cal, that hypothetically if they did the fourth season, I think she could have not like a full 120, but at least like at least some sort of significant change.
Yeah, I agree. And I think it's that, like, people say Zuko wanted redemption, right? And so he got it, whereas Azula in the last scenes shows no sign of wanting redemption, and I think that that's true. But that doesn't mean that she wouldn't not want redemption forever, and I feel like finding Zuko's mom and what happened, like, you know, Zuko has this field trip with everyone. Like, he has the Sokka field trip, he has the Katara field trip, you know, Toph tries
Dragons with Aang.
Dragons with Aang, like, Toph tries to tell him about her backstory, and he's like, nah, like, we have better things to do, so poor Toph, right?
Her feet got burned.
But
wasn't the joke like Toph is like, actually, you know, I'm pretty good. Like,
well, I think Toph is like, I had a rough upbringing and stuff, and Zuko's just like, I'm sorry you had a rough childhood, but do we really have to talk about that right now? And Toph is just like... but yeah, and so I feel like if they did a fourth season and did the stuff with her mom, like, that would be the Zuko field trip with Azula, and that would change something in Azula. I'm not saying 180, I'm sure she would still be a bit of a bitch, right, like, to her friends and all that, but I feel like there's a difference between being a bitch and wanting to murder people. I don't know, you know? So that's sort of, like, what I'm thinking, with all of that. Like, I feel like that she could have been redeemed. I feel like that she definitely has some sociopathic behavior, for sure, but she is a child, like you said, Hunter, and, you know, seeing her fall apart at the end, it's, because I sort of guessed what was happening. I was like, she's banishing everyone because May and Tylee left her, and she feels abandoned. Like, her mom, like, the root of the cause is her mom left her, then Tylee and May left her, and that sort of brought up all these issues where she banishes the Tylee, she banishes her maids, right? And that's what they say at the very end. She's like, they'll just be like Tylee and May. And I was like, uh-oh, like, I was actually right. Like, that is where this is going. And it's, you know, it's really, really sad to see her, you know, cut her hair and look all crazy. And
I feel like both of you, like, hit pretty much every single point to, like, her as a character. But for me, I think it's, like, kind of relatable in a way, because you have two siblings, like, for people who have siblings, and that's where I relate to it to an extent, because I have an older sister, a younger brother, and I'm the middle child, and, like, I feel like everyone can attest to being treated differently by your parents depending on, like, how many kids they have, like the first kid, the second kid, the third kid. And there's just general things that, you know, like, the first kid's the one that you make all the mistakes on. The second kid is the one that you try to learn from those mistakes. And usually the third child or the last child is usually the spoiled brat. So, and
that's how I feel too. I'm the oldest.
Yeah.
So out of
and
two.
in their case, yeah. And in her case, you know what I mean? Like, she, you know, she doesn't get the affection from the mom that she would want, and in return, like, it's kind of like her way of retaliating. It's like, well, then I'm gonna be, you know, this negative person. It really just, like, how she acts in the world is really what happens at home. Like, and that's how it is with all kids. Like, you're really a product of your upbringings.
Yeah.
And so, I always,
and it just happened that her father was a war criminal, so, you know, that's gonna fuck up a person a lot more, you know.
Yeah, and then the mother was the mother after a certain point was never really there. So, you know, that was just like a recipe for disaster. And thank God for Iroh. Like, that's like the only guidance. That's the only reason Zuko didn't end up like her or worse, because Iroh was there.
So that's the other thing, is like, Iroh is such a big part of Zuko's redemption and Zuko's choices, and Azula never had an influence like that. Like, I feel like Iroh was never afraid of Zuko, right? Because Zuko and Azula use a lot of fear, but with Azula, everyone was always too afraid to tell her no. Right? Like, her friends, she had no one to correct her. Whereas Iroh was like, all right, I'm gonna tell you how it fucking is. Like, that's Iroh's personality, you know? Like, in a nice way, obviously, but he wouldn't pull any punches. He wasn't gonna be like, okay, Zuko, whatever. Like,
yeah, especially the later the show goes, like, he actually starts to get, like, I remember the one scene where Zuko ends up finding, like, gets Aang's bison. You know, he gets Appa, and then, like, Iroh just goes off on him. He's like, so what are you gonna do now? Like, you have the bison, and it's like, you don't think through, you don't think these things out. Like, you're trying to be this blue spirit, but you don't have a plan, and you don't want to do the right thing. You're doing the right thing, but you don't want to, like, you know what I mean? You don't want to commit to that. Like, he's trying to, like, he's going back and forth. You know what I mean? He's trying to live both his firebending and his blue spirit identities.
Yeah.
But
my favorite Iroh comment on Azula was in the second season, after, like, Azula tries to capture both of them. It's just and Iroh's teaching Zuko how to, you know, bend lightning. Just like, should I go and, like, should we make peace with Azula? And Iroh's like, no, she's crazy. She needs to be put down. It's very much so. It's a really, that was absolutely a line. She's crazy and she needs to go down. But it's almost kind of tragic, because, like, you definitely needed someone like an Iroh in your life.
Yeah,
especially in that family, in that household.
And so
it's so crazy too. It's so weird, because, like, that's the brother of the Fire Lord, and they're even drastically different.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And I don't know any, like, I'm pretty sure they talk about it, I don't know, maybe in the books or whatever, but, like, I don't even know what the Fire Lord and Iroh's upbringings were like. Who was the grandfather? What's his name again? I think it's, like, Azil or something like that, like fire, like, because there was Sozin, and then there was the grandfather, and then it's Fire Lord Ozai.
I think it was Azil, because it was like, there was Azil and then there's Azula. Like, she was named after her grandfather. I think.
Yeah. So like that guy is their father, and it's like, well, Lord knows with their mother is, or
Well,
whatever happened to their mother, because it's like there's like a history with the
Yeah.
mothers in this series. But yeah, like I've always wondered, like, because they turned out they're kind of like in the same way, kind of like how Azula and Zuko are. Like Azula takes after, one brother, Ozai, and Zuko takes after Iroh,
Yeah.
but then again, Iroh also had his own son at a point.
Yeah,
So.
I think Iroh, like they sort of imply Iroh was sort of happy to go conquesting, and then he lost his son, and he sort
Yeah.
of considered like,
That, like, changed him.
he lost his son, like how many Earthbenders have lost their sons or whatever, like he sort of like it clicked for him, like that empathy really clicked for him, and I think Iroh was such a great fucking character. Iroh reminds me a lot about my grandfather, and so my main fear while watching the show. And here's the thing. So I'll talk about this after, I guess. But when I do the video tags, sometimes I get spoiled on things and they're not really accurate, if that makes sense. Because I'll type in like, oh, Zuko fights Azula. Like, let's just say like for a video tag. And so I remember that I was typing in something about Iroh and I saw dies. And I was like, okay, well, I don't know if that's true or not, so I'm just gonna put that away. But in my head, it was always in the back of my mind, like, what if that was real, right? Like, what
That's why you texted me, oh, Iroh doesn't die.
And so I was like, oh my god, Iroh's alive! Like, I didn't talk about it in the reaction too much, because, I mean, my reactions are still...
Video, maybe.
My reactions are still genuine, obviously, right? Like, but that one detail was something that was spoiled for me, and so I was expecting it. I was like, okay, when are we gonna see Iroh's body, man? When is he gonna drop? I was always sort of paranoid, but then he lived, and I was like, yeah! He survived, and he gets to be happy. Like, I was so happy.
I told Kaylin about this, but I remember that the Nickelodeon website had a poll up at the time during the finale, like the 4-part finale, and I think it was like the second to like one of the two of the last episodes, and the poll was like, oh, who do you think's gonna die? And it was like Iroh, Zuko, Toph, Sokka, Aang,
and no one died.
And the highest, like, no one died, but at the time, I remember the highest voted was Iroh.
Yeah.
So
I was
really
paranoid.
Some people thought he was gonna come back and do something, because like obviously he busted out of that fucking jail cell like the beast that he was, and he just goes and joins the White Lotus up again, and then it's like, well, is he gonna come back and confront his brother with his grandson, with his nephew, and or even with his niece, and so I was expecting him to die as well.
There was two there was two Iroh death flags. One of them was when they went into the camp, because they were like, oh, we'll show you where your uncle is. And like sometimes in shows, like, oh, we'll show you where your uncle is means, oh, look over here at this gravestone, this is your uncle.
Yeah.
Right? Like, I can't think of anything else that did that off the top of my head, but shows have definitely debated you in that way to sort of make it feel like, oh yeah, we'll take you to your uncle, sorry, but your uncle has been dead for like 6 months and here is his grave. Right? Shows have done that. So that's where I was the first fear. The second was when he was fighting. I thought that he would get killed, but then he didn't die, and I was like, he didn't die.
He has the perfect... I love how the last thing you really see him do in the show is he takes Ba Sing Se, but back away from the Fire Nation. Yeah. And he has a little moment of contemplation of like, all my life I had visions of taking Ba Sing Se. I did not realize it would not be from the Fire Nation.
No, it's so nice. And like he has his little tea shop, and like now he has a bunch of grandkids, right? Like he has Katara and Aang, and like they're all in his tea shop, right? So he has a bunch of kids. Like, I'm just so glad that Iroh got to be happy. He's definitely one of the best characters in the show. I think he gives a lot of beneficial advice, just, in general, like if you're an adult, if you're a kid, whatever. Like, I feel like that there's so much like grandfatherly energy in Iroh. Like, I just really like him.
Wisdom, like everything that comes out of his mouth is something that's from experience that you will probably go through in your life as well. And it's just like, I don't know. I feel like everything that comes out of his mouth is of value.
He was just a joy to have on screen. His dynamic with Zuko is like excellent, right? And so that's why I was like, they're gonna take our joy away from us, and they didn't.
That Soldier Boy song he sings.
Yeah.
Not that Soldier Boy song, other Soldier Boy
I was
song.
like, wait, Soldier Boy, wait, what? That's a heart-wrenching moment, like when he's at the memorial, like his son's.
I only knew this recently. I know the Japanese actor that plays him, Mako, he passed away between
seasons
2 and 3, I believe. So they had humorously added that kind of in that scene where they say like "Rest in peace, Mako" or like "We'll miss you, Mako." I didn't know that. So when we rewatched it, I was surprised by that.
Yeah, I mean, you can sort of tell the difference in voice actor in season 3. Like, I don't know
really?
how to explain it, but
I can't either.
I guess it's just because Iroh is very, very serious in the first scenes that we see him, so he's lost some of the weight that he throws around. Does that make sense? You know what I mean? He's very, very serious, and so you can sort of tell that it's not the same voice actor because some of the lines don't have the same like uplift after them, like the jokes, if that makes sense. I think there's like before they fly on the bison, he says something that was funny, but I was like, it just doesn't have the same. Like, obviously, it's a very hard job to replace someone who has passed away, and so I think he did a great job. Like, it's basically indistinguishable, but you could tell that like a little bit of the Iroh magic was gone in that.
Yeah, a lot
really
for me.
There's less of Iroh in that final season.
Yeah.
This is kind of off. This is because we're on the topic of like Zuko, Azula, Iroh, firebenders. What did you think of Aang's like first firebending teacher?
Oh,
that guy.
He's
just so far away.
From
that
one
my
episode.
Head. like to be honest,
Cool.
I think all of the old people coming at the end was really cool, but I was like, wait, who's that? Like, obviously I knew the Earth King, and then Sokka's sword teacher, then you had Katara's waterbending teacher, who I almost forgot, but the fire guy came in, and I was like, I don't know who you are.
And then Aang just like was playing with fire, and someone got burned.
Oh, I remember that now. Yeah. So Katara, that was when Katara got burned. Yeah.
What's more memorable than him is the guy that shows Team Avatar him, and he's just like, oh yeah, this is our guy, he's so great, and he shows up, and all of them leave. He's just like, oh man, can I come with, guys?
Yeah, I guess it was like, because it was like a secret, like they brought him to this camp and all that stuff.
And they have
like,
the one bumbling idiot. I relate to that.
But yeah, I think all.
I don't know. It was just a one-off thing. So I don't think I've ever heard you mention him. So I was just
we forgot about him a long time ago. But yeah,
honestly,
I don't know.
The cabbage salesman was a more important character in Avatar than that firebender.
But I think that really covers all the firebenders for us, except for the Fire Lord. But like, I don't have a lot to say about him. I think it's really interesting how Aang has a very sort of, I don't want to say stereotypical, but in his head, he thinks of the, like, when he's having his dream, he's like, he imagines the Fire Lord as fat with, like, bushy eyebrows and, like, a beard and all that stuff. But
this man's fucking ripped.
But when you actually see him, he is a very much a pretty boy face and like all that stuff, and then the beard, and he's ripped obviously, and so I felt like that contrast was really interesting to see him for the first time, because he wasn't.
He wears like all those clothes that like makes it really hard to tell.
I know, but like, they made him like fat, like eating a turkey leg or something, like in Aang's dream. I don't think maybe not that part, but you know what I mean.
Two things that I find interesting about that character. One, which seems odd, is that he's younger than Iroh.
Yeah.
But he descended to the throne in front of Iroh.
Yeah, because Iroh gave up the.
Yes,
his son probably died, and he was like, "Yeah, I don't want this life anymore."
Which I think is really excellent character development for Iroh.
Yeah.
It also draws a comparison between Zuko and Azula in a way, right?
Because no doubt, like Zuko was the firstborn male.
I think
and
so.
Primogenitor, he would have been. And also, the person who plays that is Mark Hamill, who voices the Joker a lot, like in the Arkham Asylum games.
Yeah.
And Master Ericus.
Yes. So Luke Skywalker plays Ozai, and it's such a weird turn for that actor, but he does a really good job. His voice is amazing, just how gravelly and threatening.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, I liked him. He was okay, but like he's a pretty standard villain. I think he put up a good fight.
Fight
But
scene was really good.
he wasn't super interesting, compared to like Azula, who had a lot of like complications, right? Like
we didn't really see him until like the Day of Black Sun, right?
So yeah, he's okay. The fight was great. But I think out of all the firebenders, it's definitely like Azula and Zuko are the most complex.
Yeah, he is definitely kind of like the typical villain of high fantasy in that he's evil to be evil, and you don't really need. He's like the Sauron from like the Lord of the Rings. He's just a bad guy.
Weird cult vibes though. Like, I'm not gonna be the Fire Lord, I'm gonna be the Phoenix King, and it sounds like he wants to be god of the world.
And he's gonna burn all of the earth, and from its ashes will rise.
And so that was really interesting.
It's a terrible idea, but
is that he's evil to be evil, but he seems to genuinely like he wants to like scorch the earth and then be god and stuff, and I was just like,
okay. Bro, you realize you're just a firebender, right? Like.
And so, yeah, that's very interesting, too, because at the end, obviously, Aang takes away his firebending, and that really takes away all of him.
So fucking cool.
Like,
it's like the best. It's like the best alternative for Aang, because he didn't want to kill him.
Because, like, he tries his best to be God, but he is just a firebender, and that could easily be taken away.
Yeah.
I guess...
That's kind of...
Wait, we missed a firebender.
Oh.
No.
Roku.
Oh.
Oh, yeah, he was really good.
Originally a firebender.
Avatar
Roku and Sozin as well. Episodes they had together.
Was he more like in the Avatar like category? Did you
want to,
like...
I mean, they're okay. Like, all of the avatars, you don't see them too much. You see him more than all the other ones.
Like Kyoshi.
It's fascinating to hear about them. I think their last scene with Aang, where they all give their own wisdom, is really cool.
Roku's basically Roku is like the Iroh for Aang.
Yeah,
like,
I guess.
He's basically his guide the entire like from the first time you see him at the firebending tower, and then like throughout all of his spirit adventures.
But you also have like
adventures to the spirit world and stuff.
In the end scene, he talks to Roku, he talks to Kyoshi, he talks to the water avatar that you see in the special episode.
You haven't even seen,
and then he talks to the Earth Girl. That like he tries to go far back to talk to all of them.
An Airbender,
he talked
about an air avatar too.
Yeah, he talks to that's the girl. The girl.
Okay.
I can't remember her name anymore, but she's the air avatar and all that. And so it's very interesting, like how they played into the story. They all have very interesting stories, but they are like side characters basically. So I didn't have much to say about them. I enjoyed their presence. I think having him talk to all of them is very nice. Like I really liked everything they had to say and all the advice that they gave.
What did you think about like his backstory episode with Sozin? Because that
was crazy.
That sets into play like all of the events of like now.
And it's a really nice, like, it's nice how everything comes around, because you had the Avatar and the Fire Lord, and then at the end you have Aang and Zuko, and they hug, and like Aang's in the traditional, I guess, Avatar clothes, or the Air Nomad clothes or whatever, and then Zuko's the Fire Lord, and so it's like what Zuko and like what Roku and Sozin, what Roku and Sozin could not achieve, Aang and Zuko both achieved it. Yeah. And it was very interesting, like, because it was childhood friends torn apart by the powers of the Avatar, basically. And I guess that means that Roku became the Avatar, because it's not from birth, is it? Because for him it wasn't, was it?
No,
for Korra, you see Korra realizes very young that she can use multiple elements.
Yeah, but it's like...
But I think Roku was an adult, and then he got it.
Yeah.
You'll find out. If you continue the show with Korra, it explains.
Because I don't think it's birth. Like, you see Aang as a baby, but I think that's just because he was a baby when Roku did the thing. Because the waterbending guy, he must have died trying to find his wife and all that stuff. Like, he must have died when he like entered into the spirit world to go after the face stealer. And so I think when he died, that's when it transferred to Roku. Yes. And so I think that is how it was supposed to work. I don't know where I was going with that. I was just sort of thinking, like, he was anyone could have been. I mean, it's good. I mean, I don't think anyone could have been the Avatar, but like anyone could have been the Avatar, but it was Roku, and it was, the friend of the Fire Lord, like all that.
Stuff. And then they have like a test to figure it out too. Like from birth, it's like, oh, pick your favorite toys or whatever.
Yeah.
And it's just like a It's like, oh well, you're gonna be the Avatar next.
But yeah, I
I
like to
mean,
see all of the past lives. It was very, very interesting, and
I like that entire area too, like that entire temple, like where you see all the statues,
that was great.
and yeah,
I'm thinking about the
that's
island,
really...
like the island on the back of the turtle lion.
Yes.
Oh,
That's
okay.
where
Yeah,
he
yeah,
sees all of the spirits and like talks to
yeah.
them and asks for their
Mhm.
advice. And I was really
The
rooting
lion
for
turtle,
this.
very convenient lion turtle to
Yeah.
show up when it did.
I was rooting for the spirits though, because I think the air nomad was like, hey, the monks taught you well, but you're not a monk, you're the Avatar. And I was like, yeah, fucking tell him, bro. Like, he has to get rid of this whole not killing people thing. Like, I really liked what she said, because what she said is so true, and I feel like that's a great thing, is that all of them make a perfectly valid argument for killing Ozai. All of them have...
Airbenders are dead because we don't fight.
All of them have a very good point. You know, like, it was just really great, that they can make a very compelling argument, even if Aang goes against it. And I think what was nice about the turtle thing is that, I don't know if you've heard about this, Arnold, but I think we probably learned it when we were in school, but there's, like, a Native American, like, story about how the world is on the back of a giant turtle and all that stuff, or at least, like, Canada or something. You know what I'm talking about?
Canada. Yeah.
Yeah, like the back of a moving turtle and all that stuff. And so I feel like that, like Avatar, like people joke there are no white people in Avatar, right? Like people have joked about that, like that it is, you know, Asian, and then the waterbending tribe is obviously inspired by indigenous people like around the world and all that. All that type of stuff, and so people joke around like that. But it's true though, when they take from so many different...
Shyamalan, I'll tell you that much.
Oh boy, that's what I didn't want. But yeah, they take from so many different sort of myths, but it's not the Western myths. You know what I mean? Like, it's not like the fairy tale.
Do we even have myths? Do we have, like, does America, like...
Yeah, America has the myths from, like, England and stuff. Like, when I think about Brothers Grimm...
Jersey Devil.
Like, Brothers Grimm is a...
Immigrants taking your job. I hear that's a very famous one.
Oh boy.
Oh boy.
Western fairy tales are like the Brothers Grimm. Like, even though America and like Canada like aren't a part of England anymore, like those are like the Western fairy tales, right? But then you have sort of like indigenous stories, and then you have, you know, Eastern fairy tales like Sun Wukong and all of that stuff, like Journey to the East and all that. So that's what I'm sort of thinking of, is that Avatar takes a lot more inspiration from the fairy tales that you wouldn't necessarily think about compared to like the westernized, you know, fairy tales and stuff like that. So I feel like that was really interesting. Like, that's the first thing I saw or thought when I saw the turtle thing, is that sort of myth, because I think that the turtle is also supposed to be almost like God, and so it makes sense that this turtle spirit that's like 1 million years old would give Aang the power that he's sort of seeking. Like, it's convenient, but at the same time, we've seen other spirits participate in the world and not participate, like the owl and all that sort of stuff. So I don't know, I really liked it.
Yeah, I love that owl. Owls look so cool.
Yeah. I wouldn't say that it's like out of nowhere, because a big theme of Avatar is like the arbitrariness or the sameness of humanity. Like, we try to imagine earthbenders, firebenders, waterbenders as being intrinsically different from one another, when in actuality they are the same. They're just manifestations of different energy. You see that in like how not all Fire Nation people are bad, not all Earth Nation people are good. And so to have that show up at the end, it doesn't feel like a total ass pull to me.
Yeah.
It seems like it's built up with the theme of the show.
Because that's what he says, right? He's like, we didn't wield elements. We wielded our own energy.
Before the elements, we bended.
And so I feel like that's super interesting. And it reduces the Fire Lord to what he is, which is just a man. You know what I mean? And so I really, really like how it all sort of, you know, comes together and goes around. And I like that Aang, like, he got... Oh my god. The funniest part of Avatar is Aang getting hit in the lightning spot and him rebooting, like, a Windows computer. And he's like, oh, the Avatar state turned on again. Like, that was so funny. Oh my god. But yeah, I thought that at first that was what he was getting back. I was like, oh, the turtle gave him back the Avatar state. But no, the Avatar state just clicked in when he hit himself in the back. On the button.
and then the Fire Lord was on the run. That was such a great turnaround.
It was such a good fight.
I was like, yo, Aang's literally like that. I remember, like, dude, that day was so fucking crazy. I had like a bunch of friends over watching that finale episode, and I was like, the big question for me was like, how is Aang gonna beat him if he's not gonna kill him?
Yeah,
And that was
I
really
agree.
surprising too. And at the time, I don't even know how old I was. I think I was still in like middle school, I think, but or maybe freshman year of high school. But like, no part of me could think that he would be able to. The concept of taking someone's bending away was just. That was just so far removed from any theory that I could have thought of, and I thought that I was like, "Wow, that's the perfect answer." Like now he's not a threat. And he's alive.
Because, yeah, like, I mean, his bending made him feel like a god, but he is no more than any other human, you know?
Yeah.
And so I feel like, and that's the other thing, like, he wiped out a bunch of other benders, right? Because, like, you have that whole thing with Katara's mom, you know, like, the water benders.
The
like,
airbending nation.
And I think that really proves that he, like, you know, he wanted to be a god, but he is nothing more than a man, and he's so afraid of all of these other benders that he will kill the other benders.
Not even him too. Like it's like Aang said too. He's like him and his forefathers. So like his grandfather, his father, his grandfather. You know, like the last couple generations really fucked things over for the world. And it's like, well, we got to take care of you.
Hopefully, his great grandfather was a chill guy, but beyond that.
But
like,
yeah,
what went wrong with this family?
I guess we sort of
oh
segued.
God, my son's an asshole.
We sort of segued into that, so let's talk about Aang a little bit.
Yeah.
Aang at heart is still a little kid. So for me, like, I like Aang,
112 years old.
I like Aang how I am sort of like, that's nice, like, younger cousin, you know what I mean? Like, I didn't grow an attachment to Aang necessarily, because Aang is just so far removed from me. Like, I'm almost 20 years old watching this show now, and so it feels a lot, I don't know, there's a divide between us.
Like 16, right?
Huh?
Zuko's only 16.
Yeah, but Zuko, I don't know, Zuko's a little
Zuko's
closer.
been through some shit.
So Iroh's 82. You're closer to 12 than like 82.
I know, but I'm saying, like, in terms of, like, a lot of people, when they probably watched Avatar, they probably saw Aang, and they were probably like, yeah, like, that's me, almost. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I can relate to Aang, because I, too, am a child. Like, I don't want to say...
I mean, I don't know if I can.
I don't want to say like a Sword Art Online thing where it's like, oh, you're the main character. That's not what I mean. But I mean just, you know, there's this intrinsic feeling in us to like be like, oh, like we could be like that. We're also a kid and we can kick ass, you know.
You'd want to be like, I could be like Katara.
Yeah, that's who I sort of connect more with.
There you go.
I think it's also that, like, you know, it's been touch and go, like, it's questionable sometimes, like, whether I'll like a male character or not is pretty hit or miss. I do really like Aang, but, you know, he is very much a little kid compared to all the other characters, and I don't feel like that's a bad thing. It's a good thing for the demographic that the show is supposed to be, but for me, I'm just like, oh, Aang, you small child.
I wouldn't say that he is, I mean, he's childish, but also, he feels like, I think the show really kicks off.
He grows a lot.
Couple episodes being slow, I feel like the show really kicks off when he goes to the Southern Air Temple, or the Air Temple he was from, and sees like you know the monks,
his teacher.
And so like I think that it's interesting watching like a child have to go through such like emotionally taxing and complicated issues, because that's what I really love about Avatar, is that there's never like a simple answer to anything.
Yeah.
Never like Sozin's Comet, or it's not like the Day of No Sun, that didn't work out.
Yeah.
You can't just kill the Fire Lord, that doesn't work out. We can't just get a regular teacher, that doesn't work out. And so it's really fun watching this kid, who's fundamentally still a child, have to be an adult, yet still maintain some of it. He
definitely goes through shit, right? And so what I mean more is how he deals with it, like, could not be me. Like, I could not keep Aang's disposition, you know what I mean? And so I feel like that's why, for me, I relate more to Katara, or, like, I don't want to say edgy, but more edgy, like Zuko, you know what I mean? Like, sort of the more moody type. Like, Aang to me seems so far removed, because, like, could not be me, sis. I could not be that positive with all that you've seen, you know? And
Sorry, I was going to say, I think maybe I feel like that's what the grand appeal of the show is, like, because we did the discussion on Full Metal before this one, but like they're kids too, you know what I mean? It's like kids being thrown into like adult situations, and it's kind of it's something to be admired, to be like, wow, kids can deal with these situations a lot more than some adults can deal with these situations.
Yeah.
And I wonder if that's the appeal to some of these fictional stories.
I think there's definitely like there's gonna be someone that you can relate to, right? Like Sokka, Katara, and Toph. Like there's someone anywhere. And so again, I really like Aang, but he's not the one that I'm personally most connected to. I really like his journey. I think that his growth throughout the story is really interesting because it's a lot like Full Metal, where fundamentally he does still stay a kid and very like fun loving and all of that. But like when it's time to get I don't know. It's hard to explain too, because I wouldn't say when it's time to get serious, he gets serious, because sometimes he does. But
turns on that avatar
in the last scene, though, not in the last scene, but like in the last couple episodes, he also runs away again, and that reminds you that he is indeed still a child, and he feels like he isn't ready, and he still runs. And so I feel like all of that is really, really interesting for his character, because it's not as easy as, well, I'm an adult now, I've grown up now, right?
Yeah. You can definitely sympathize with that too, because like it's the whole reason why he ran off in the first place, because he was like, you had all these adults like telling him like, yep, you got to do this, you're the Avatar, you have to save the world, and he's like, well, what the fuck, and then finding out, oh, I got to do it before the end of the summer. I wonder how, like, the fact that he managed to do all that in such a short time, you know what I mean, like I think within a year is that's a lot of pressure to add on.
I feel like that it's a lot like Zuko, because Zuko goes through a giant change, but fundamentally some parts of Zuko stay the same. Like how he talks to Aang sometimes, like I can think of like the Katara episode. He's like, well, that's nice in fairy tale land, Aang, but this is the real world. Like he still has the attitude that he's always sort of had throughout it all. And so I feel like Aang is very much similar. Like Aang goes through a lot of growth and goes through a lot of changes, but when it comes down to it, he does fall into old habits and he does run away sometimes because he is still, a kid, right? And so I feel like, it's very similar to Full Metal in that way. It's like the characters change, but their core is the same. They don't go like entirely like warped, if that makes sense. And not many shows do, but it's also just something rare. Like I have seen shows where characters by the end act so out of character from where they started, and sometimes it works if it's a natural progression, or sometimes it just does not, right? So I'm glad that they can keep the core the same but still change all the characters, because I feel like that's true of everyone. Like everyone has a core personality trait that sort of stays with them, but they change a lot. Like Katara has always been motherly and stuff like that, but she grows so much. I feel like Katara, out of the girls, I think is definitely my favorite.
You said motherly, and for some strange reason that reminded me of the episode where she's teaching Aang to like do water bending, and then he's doing the water bending, like she's teaching him how to do like the water whip technique from that scroll, and then he ends up doing it better than her, and she's like, all right, well, fuck you then, I'm not gonna help you. Apparently you're like the best water bender ever, you don't need my help. And I don't know why that just reminded me of that moment, because like she was like kind of being like a guide for him, and then he's like, oh, I'm a fucking natural.
Well, there's a scene where Toph is like, fuck you, Katara, you're not my mom, and Sokka's like, well, listen, Katara's not my mom either, they have this heart-to-heart on the rock, but Katara, like, X, Y, and Z, like, she means well, she loves you, like, she's, the only thing that I've had since my mom went away, like, she's probably the best mom either of us will ever have, you know what I'm saying? Like, that was kind of his attitude when he was talking to Toph, because obviously Toph's parents are questionable, so, I really like Katara. I like all of the changes she went through. I like the revenge field trip that she goes on. I'm glad she didn't murder that guy.
Field trip.
And I love that, even though her relationship with Zuko has been the most strained because she trusted him, and then he stabbed her in the back, at the very end, like, when it counts, like, they, fight together against Azula, and, like, her fight and how she does that is badass. Yeah, we'll talk about the ship again. Not right now. We'll talk about it. But yeah, Aang is a very, like, good character, but Katara, like, I feel like everything Katara does at the very end, like, it's just so meaningful, and how she freezes them both, and it reminded me a lot of, like, when Aang is frozen in the circle, and she freezes them both, and I was like, oh my god, is Katara gonna die here? Is she gonna stay frozen for the sake of killing Azula?
Oh, no.
But then she turns herself into water, and, ties her up, and all that stuff. It's just such a good scene. Like, Katara is just such a good character, man.
Yeah.
I think to describe her being motherly is to maybe limiting because I think she is a
She's
lot
not
more
just
than
motherly, but that's what I think of when I think of Katara compared to like Toph. You know?
that.
Yeah,
Toph.
in conjunction with the gang.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Toph, I think, is my favorite. I'm not
Toph
gonna
is
lie,
my
it's
favorite
probably
fucking
the
character.
like,
She's
top
the
3 favorite
best.
characters.
Yeah, she's great. She's my favorite character as well.
Yeah, I mean,
think that's why I want to be an Earthbender. Like, solely because of her, not gonna lie.
she was definitely like runner-up when I was thinking about like, you know, Zuko and all that stuff.
She has such great like dry humor, and she's you know, she's like a great bender and like a great teacher, and I don't know, I just love her like nothing can bother me, nothing can hurt me attitude to a lot of stuff.
Even though
And
deep inside she does hurt though.
Yeah, and she like bounces off of like the characters really well. Like her and Sokka have great like comedic chemistry together. They're always like cracking jokes, and you know, I think she was like a great character for me that I enjoyed through and through. Like because of that.
Like next, I guess, because we talked about.
And whenever I saw
Katara,
her bending, like whenever she was in a fight, I was just like, "You're so fucking cool." Like she was just awesome.
With Toph and Sokka, well, I guess we'll talk about Sokka first because he was the first one to introduce. So somebody paid us to make a video about why Sokka and Jean are similar, but they paid us to make that video when I hadn't watched Avatar yet. And so the fact that somebody had been comparing Jean to Sokka, and like had like this argument really put a bad taste in my mouth.
Preconceived notions about Sokka going into the show.
Because I fucking hated Jean. Like this was like volume 5 when I had a hate boner against Jean. And so whatever that person did, like they turned me off. Like I was very apprehensive to liking Sokka. But Sokka's
good.
Sokka's the goat. Sokka's so cool.
Describe him like that.
Sokka's the goat.
I know, like Sokka, I really loved his whole character because he can't bend, but you know, he's really the only regular human in the group, but he worked with what he has. He's someone we can
all relate to.
He's so funny. Like, I feel like his lines are really good all the time. Like, he was just, I really, really liked him.
He's also like the ideas guy, but he's an actual ideas guy. Like he comes up with ideas.
That's probably where most of the Jean parallels came from. It's
but
like,
he has good ideas.
The thinking man of the group. Yeah. Like, yeah, he's definitely, you know, he represents like the common man. Like
I feel like
because he's not a bender.
It's Zuko, Sokka. Like if I had to rank the male characters, I guess Iroh. Okay, Zuko, Iroh, Sokka. Like that is how I would rank the male characters. Whereas the female characters, I would do, I think like did I already say Katara, Toph, Azula. Maybe. I don't know.
Okay.
Depending on the day, I may put Azula first. But Toph is like a hard one for me because I feel like that she was so badass throughout the entire show, but Katara's badass moment like flipped something in me, I guess, like flipped them both. But
when she fought that water bending master, she was like pissed off that he was like talking down about women, and she was like,
there was that.
Set your ass outside right now, old man.
There was that, and just I mean, at the very end of the show, like her putting the chains on Azula, that changed how I saw Katara like entirely. But Toph was such a strong character all the way throughout, and such a fucking badass, and like she basically invented how to metal bend and all that stuff, and so
she developed the metal bending, and that was where I was like solidified. I'm like, okay, I'm definitely being an earthbender now.
Because I remember I was talking to Hunter, and I was like, well, metal comes from the fucking earth, so what's the fucking problem? Like that is what I was like yelling about in season 2 or something.
And I couldn't say anything. I was just like, but it's more refined.
But I knew she would do it. I knew it.
Yeah,
I knew
like
she would impress me.
like the impurities of the metal, which work in her favor. But yeah, I think that's like the coolest part of like the bending system is just like there's subcategories to everything.
Yeah.
So like water bending, you got blood bending, earth bending, metal bending, fire bending, lightning bending.
Well, here's the thing.
Wind. So
has some qualifications that I think. Yeah, I'll just leave it at that.
Okay, so I have a couple things about that.
I think there can be some secondaries to air, but I don't know just yet.
But Aang says, like, they didn't used to bend elements, they used to bend energy. So it makes sense that everything could eventually be bendable, because those are the categories that humanity has figured out and has made. But, like, it makes sense why metal bending could eventually happen, because it's the energy, like, the metal has energy, you know? So it makes sense that Toph, like, figured that out based on what Aang... So Toph really figured out, like, what Aang was taught before Aang fucking did, you know what I mean? Like, she sort of used that principle. With the air thing, it's like, okay, so I know this is so off topic and neither of you are gonna tell me, but there are no airbenders after Aang dies, right? So
unless he has kids.
Which is the only, like, I would... Oh
And
my
that
god,
kid
did I
has
talk
kids.
about this? I think there was an Avatar video where I did mention this, like, you know how there was a Ruby theory that Ozpin was the sort of, source of the silver eyes, and that every regular woman that Ozpin fucked produced a silver-eyed child. Like, basically, magic plus magic, you get magic children, but Ozpin plus normal remnant person, you get silver-eyed child. I was like, Aang is gonna have to bang every fucking woman in the world to get the air nomads back. That's what I said. I don't remember if you were there.
His kids would be able to, like,
I know, but I'm saying, like, he would just need to go, like...
Are you gonna watch Korra?
Probably, yeah.
It's
and
worth
so
it.
that's what I was sort of thinking is, like, Aang is gonna have to, like, donate his sperm for the betterment of bringing back the air nomads, because he's the only one. So I'm guessing in Korra maybe they repopulated, but...
In the comic books, you meet a group of, I guess, airbending fanatics, like an airbenders appreciation club.
Oh, that's cute!
Well, hypothetically, he could just bang everyone in the air.
God.
It's all women, too.
All women.
Like,
Oh, really? All women? How ironic. Oh, yeah, well, I guess they'd be, like, appreciating the last airbender.
Last
and they'd be all
airbender.
women.
And they want the D. So it could have happened.
That's why I ship
ground
Katara
zero
and
for the
Zuko,
next
because
generation.
Aang has a sacred duty to bring back his population.
Oh, okay.
Anyway.
It does kind of suck, though, because then all the airbenders would be so inbred.
Well, that's what I'm saying. That's why you gotta make a lot of them. So they all have varying sort of genetics, you know? Anyway, so yeah, I really love Toph. To get back to Toph for a minute, I think her backstory is really interesting, and there was this moment when Zuko and Toph were talking where I realized that they are not that different, and that's when the ship was born. Like, that Toph is from this sort of family that, you know, didn't treat her right or didn't, like, you know, recognize her abilities and all of that stuff. And Zuko is sort of the same way, and they're both from, like, the rich people families, if you want to call it that. So, like, I saw this Venn diagram of, like, Toph and Zuko in that moment, and I was like, damn, that's great. I really, really like that. So yeah, I thought that was nice. But
something I also really love about Toph. Unless you want to go.
Oh no, I didn't have anything.
What I love
She's
really
just so cool.
about Toph is that she's a really interesting. When you show characters with disabilities in media, it's very rare that you get something like Toph in which she's incredibly capable.
Yeah.
And the way her disability affects her life is not in it actually really affecting her life, but rather other people's opinions of her because of her disability.
I agree.
That
it was
most
so
negatively.
good.
And that
It's
is
kind of... Yeah, sorry, go on.
No, it's just because, like, talking to disabled people, like, that's a very prevalent idea that it's not so much the actual physical disability, it's how people treat you. And I find it interesting that it focuses so specifically on that.
Yeah.
Yeah. I was actually going to say, the whole time I was talking about Toph, I didn't even think of her disability, because, like, it doesn't hinder her in any way, shape, or form.
Mind you, it is cheating, because, you know, real blind people can't exactly...
Yeah, of course, absolutely.
I think it's a really good representation in that way, and it's also, like, it's interesting because it's sort of, again, like you said, Hunter, it's a commentary on everybody else, you know, because, like, I think we fall into the habit of, like, oh, I would hate to be blind, I would hate to be in a wheelchair, and some people say that to the people that are, you know, with that disability, right? Which is not something, but for them, that is their normal life. Like, you are telling them that you see something wrong with them, you know? And so I feel like that with Toph herself, she doesn't see anything wrong with with being blind, but it's her parents that sort of suffocate her. And I feel like, I don't know if this would be canon to Avatar Society, but I feel like there could be an element that they are ashamed of her, because that also happened. Like, you sort of hear stuff about that, like parents being ashamed of their...
Yeah, because they're like in a family, like they have like this royal family.
Yeah, like you're a rich family and all that
like,
sort of stuff.
Like, oh, we have you know, a child that's not perfect or whatever.
Yeah,
you know,
and so I feel like that's an element too, is like the shame.
I was so fucking pissed when the father saw his daughter earthbending and everything, and he just says, "Oh my God, we've given you way too much control." Now, like, do you not see like that the thing that you're like overprotecting her about being blind and being fragile and in it, like she's totally capable of handling herself, and I don't know, they're just in denial at that point. I'm like, okay, fuck her parents.
I feel like that's the other thing about Avatar, like relatability wise, is that like you got the dead parents, you got the parents that left, you got the, you know, the suffocating parents, you got obviously like people like Iroh, right? Like you got the abusive parents, like everybody can relate on some sort of
No one has a good relationship, continued relationship with their parents.
Well, except for, you know, Sokka and Katara do.
Oh, I guess they do.
I mean, their dad, yeah.
Their mom dies.
Yeah, but that's what I'm saying, right? Like, there's something for everyone.
A stable, like, parental support system.
You can have either a mom and her dad, or you can be a character in Avatar, but you can't have both.
And so, like, that's, I don't know, I found that really interesting, too, is that it's showing people from all types of, you know, family situations as well. Like, obviously, there's the blindness, which is going to be very important for a lot of people, and I see why. But yeah, I feel like there's that element as well, like, just all of the different, like, family units, and I feel like a lot of kids would relate to that in different ways, like watching the show. Even me as an adult, like I see a lot of my grandfather in Iroh, like just the infinite no wisdom that he has and all that sort of stuff. But I guess who haven't we talked about? We talked about Toph, Sokka, Katara, Aang.
Some of the smaller characters. I mean, how can we forget Appa?
Some side characters. Yeah, Appa and Momo.
I think Suki.
I don't think I've heard you talk about Momo the entire.
Oh, I don't give a shit about them. I'm sorry. Like, I like Appa.
Bye.
Appa alone, or not Appa alone. That was Zuko alone. The Appa episode where
Appa alone. Yeah, Appa alone when Appa walks into a village, you know, being run over by soldiers.
Where Appa goes flying around by himself, and that's the entire episode, and I'm sorry, but I could not with that one. Like, I thought it was cute, but it was not reaction material, unfortunately, so I just sat there like...
Does not need to be. Like, you can just embrace that for what it was.
It was okay. Momo, I really don't care about. I think that Momo was pretty unnecessary, like, as far as everything goes. I think Appa obviously has a functional purpose, and I like Appa more than Momo.
He's useful.
But yeah, I like Appa better than Momo. When you guys said side characters, I thought more about, like, Suki and May and Ty Lee. I mean,
here's a side character, and I feel like I already know your opinion on this. Jet.
Oh.
Ooh. Oh God, I already know how you feel about Jet.
Jet was pretty sexy, like as a character, like not even like him, but like as a concept, like the sort of, I don't want to say vigilante, but like rogue bad boy, all that, and like he died, or something. It wasn't
a boy put him down. It seemed like it.
Yeah, so they made a joke about that in the play. They were like, wait, did Jet die? And then they were like, oh, it was kind of unclear. And so I think that sort of implying that he did die. I think the boys had to kill him.
And then his friend came through with the arrow, and they were just like, yo, we'll take care of this. And the guy just like,
yeah.
I feel like they were just gonna like mercy kill him at that point. I feel
like they did, yeah. And so
it seemed like
what I really
Jet
love about...
fueled the Zuko and Katara ship, because we saw that Katara was into guys like that. That was what happened in my head. Go ahead, Hunter.
What I love about the Jet episode and also the Zuko alone episode is that rewatching it now a little older, I realized fundamentally how anti-war a show Avatar is. And that you see that with the Jet episode and also Zuko alone, in that in war, it necessitates immorality. It necessitates, just as a concept, being terrible to people who definitely do not deserve it.
Yeah.
And the Jet episode was the first example of that. And I think arguably, maybe aside from the Zuko alone episode, I think the best example of that in the show. this kind of anti-war sentiment.
Yeah, I mean, Jet and them, they're pretty all fucked up. I do understand what you mean, though, because, like, the village one, like, you know, those are supposed to be the good guys. They're not Fire Nation. They're the people in the town. I think they're Earthbenders. I don't remember. Like, when Zuko alone is going through, I think there's some sort of benders, and they're supposed to be protecting the town, but then they abuse their power, like, they abuse their power, and all that sort of stuff. And so you sort of see, like, again, what you're talking about, Hunter, like, they're abusing their power because, like, everybody is starving and terrible, like, because of the Fire Nation, you know what I mean? And there's definitely, like, bad people on all sides. Like, you have the Dai Li, and, like, there's no war in Ba Sing Se. Like, that's a great example of, like,
oh my god, yeah,
propaganda stuff, I guess, or I don't know how to explain it, but, like information control, censorship, like, all that sort of stuff.
No, all those words work.
And so, yeah, it's very, very interesting, all of those.
Pipsqueak is, no, it's not Pipsqueak. Oh, no, it's Smellerbee. Smellerbee is the trans icon.
Yeah. Oh, that was the other thing. I like the guy that's in the wheelchair that flies. He was nice.
Yes.
And I like that.
Yes.
I like that rep as well. That was
the pilots and, like, nice. the air balloons.
That was really cool. I think my favorite side character is probably Suki. I think Suki is, like, listen, like, Ty Lee and May, like, they're alright, but Suki's such a fucking badass.
May. I love May so much.
I think if I had to rank them, I think
I like May a lot.
I think it's, like, Ty Lee, Suki, May in terms of power, like, in terms of, like, fighting capabilities, but I do like Suki a lot. I like her romance with Sokka. I like that she stopped Sokka from being a asshole. You know, like, you know, Sokka wasn't really an asshole, but there was a minute, yeah, he drank the respect women juice. Yeah, there was a minute where he was kind of being sexist, and then he sort of, you know, turned over a new leaf with that, so I was glad. I was like, good job,
well,
Sokka.
His first girlfriend turned into the moon, so...
I'm glad that Sokka found happiness and all that stuff. But yeah, Suki's just, she's really good, because, like, she leads her own sort of, like, clan of all-female warriors. Like, she's
Kyoshi warriors,
pretty badass.
Avatar Kyoshi, that's kind of cool how it ties in, like, with Aang's past life, too.
I really like Ty Lee's personality, and obviously her fighting capabilities. Like, she was a fucking, like, machine for a while. Like, you couldn't beat her, and so that was nice. May I never really liked. I'll just say that. I don't know if it's because of the ship.
Because she got in the way of your ship?
I don't know.
Is that why you don't like her?
I can't say, but I didn't really like her. But near the end, when she goes against Azula, then I really liked her. Like, I guess all the other time I just didn't really click with her, but by the end, when she's like, I love Zuko more than I fear you, I was like, yes, bitch, like, you go get it. Like, it was so good. It was great. And the beach episode with all of them, I guess that's when I really didn't understand May, because it seems like May and Zuko were just sort of together to be, you know what I mean? But then by the end, you actually sort of see their relationship is, like, valid. I don't know, it's hard to explain, but it's like, it seems like they were only together, like, for the sake of being together, and not because, you know, Zuko even questions, like, if she likes him and all that sort of stuff, but that changes by the end, where they realize that their feelings for each other are genuine, just sort of clouded by Azula and all their other baggage going on. So yeah, I think at the end, like, they were good. I think my favorite, like, random character was the owl spirit.
I loved him.
Oh my god, yeah. In the Wan Shi Tong's
library.
library.
How pessimistic he is of humanity.
He's
like, I don't trust any of you bitches.
He was really, like, he was a random one, because he only showed up, like, those 2 times, but, like, he...
Is that the episode? I don't know if it...
That's the episode where they discover the comet. They're in the library.
No, I know that, but I don't know if he makes an appearance in Korra, but, like, does he say something about, like, the radio? And he's like, oh, there's, like, a small man in the radio, and I don't know if it's Avatar, if it's Korra that he's that.
I think it might be Korra.
I don't remember. That.
Okay.
Because Korra is like the 1920s-ish.
Oh yeah, I'm like, what the fuck's a radio in Avatar? Okay, never mind. I take that back.
What about the first season episode where it's the 2 tribes and Aang makes up that story about the origin of their historic strife?
Yeah.
I hate that episode, but I also kind of love it.
I think you were saying this, Hunter, but that's, like, regarded as, like, the worst Avatar episode. I don't know, to be honest. I guess it depends.
Episode again?
It's the episode where they have to pass through like the dangerous jungle, or not jungle, the dangerous desert, and it's the two different groups of people, and one group hates the other.
Oh,
and
they all have to go.
Like,
yeah. Okay. Yeah. Is that what the secret tunnel?
No, that was a different one. It was
okay. Yeah. Oh yeah. Never mind. Okay, I remember now. That was like
your ancestor did this to me and all of that stuff. Like that.
No, they were a joke. Like they pass an orb, one of them took the ball.
Yeah.
And he did it totally. And on one hand, it's like it's so bad, but on the other hand, I just love it. I love those characters. I love that Aang moment, even if it is terrible.
I totally forgot about that. That's probably for the best.
So yeah, some great minor characters. Those characters.
I had one.
Speaking of other minor characters, what do you think of Hama?
Hama?
The old lady.
The old lady.
Yeah.
Oh, the bloodbender.
That was a really sad one because it's like it's clear like she was basically a prisoner of war, and all that stuff. I think I talked about this in my reaction. I don't think Hunter was there for that. It was one of the ones I did alone, but you can sort of make a sort of Holocaust comparison, like she was imprisoned and watched her people die. Like that's the implication, I think, is that the rest of her people all got like murdered because they were waterbenders. And, they were sort of like exterminated. And so it was a really tough episode because I don't think anyone would fault a Holocaust survivor for going a little crazy, you know what I'm saying, and wanting that revenge, but at the same time, it's revenge on innocent people, and so she was a really complex lady, and that was a really interesting episode with the blood bending and all that stuff, because I felt really bad for her. Like, what she did was still wrong, but, like, this lady just needs some therapy, you know what I mean? Like, she just got left to her own devices with no family and no one else like in her life. Like I feel like that she could have gone on the right path if she had other waterbenders that survived with her, right?
Yeah.
And they could have all gone on the right path of life, but instead she was alone.
Were you gonna say something, Hunter?
No, I think that's that example of that kind of like anti-war sort of sentiment of the show, of the morality of not displaying like these conflicts as being like morally black and white, of being very gray, of having one of the most frightening, horrifying person be someone who we're incredibly sympathetic to.
Yeah. It's very, like, it's all very complex. Like, I don't think, like, other than the Fire Lord being evil, obviously, there isn't a lot of black and white in Avatar. Like, it's very good.
Even Sozin, like Sozin's like ultimately he was an imperialist and he was like a fascist, but he believed his own shit. He believed his own lies. He was like, everything's so great in the Fire Nation. We can export that greatness. Like it's that paternalism, and that even if you think you're doing the right thing, it's never quite right. And I love how they treat that not as a positive thing, because it's definitely not a positive thing, but they give it a realistic apparition of like, of colonists think they're doing the right thing.
Yeah.
They think they're spreading civilization.
Yeah, and it's only like, you can only realize after that it's not. Does that make sense? You know what I mean? Like you can only see now, and your choices now, like even if your ancestors thought it was a good thing, if you are seeing it now as a bad thing, that is when you give, reparations to people. You know what I mean? You make up for what they did, because you are now no longer ignorant. But if you choose to stay in that ignorance, that is the problem, and that's a problem with the Fire Lord. Like he probably knows at this point it's not, you know what I mean? Like it's probably not the best way to go about the world and like world relations and all that stuff, but he just continues because that's the tradition of the Fire Nation, and lots of propaganda in the Fire Nation. Like when Aang goes to school, there's a lot of that.
You know who I really liked as like a kind of like a one-off? You don't see him very often, but I really like Boomy.
The old man.
The Earthbender. Like Aang's. Like I thought that was a really cool way of showing like, oh wow, him and Aang were friends when they were kids.
Yeah.
And like 100 years pass, Aang's still a kid, but Boomy's actually obviously
I think that
grown
was
up.
really cool.
I thought that was really clever way of like. He's like, oh, what's my name? He's like, oh, I'm supposed to know this guy. And he's like, Boomy, you're a mad genius. I love that.
Yeah.
I really liked whenever we saw him. He's like fucking crazy. He's out there. Another very respectful Earthbender who might influence my reasons for wanting to be an Earthbender.
There's so many good characters in Avatar.
Yeah. Sparky Boom Man? Anybody?
Oh, he's deeply frightening.
I guess to conclude, I kind of want to talk about ships a little bit,
Oh,
and then
boy.
we'll be
Wait,
done.
before we get to that, what did you think about, like, so you know, like how the lion turtle says, like, oh, before we bent, the elements, we bent our own energy. What did you think about like bending even originating, like even before the humans, like it originated from like the animals, like the dragons were the original firebenders.
Yeah, that makes sense. And
Badger moles were the earthbenders.
it makes sense.
I assume the moon
It
spirits,
was the
like
moon and the
water,
tide.
and then the air bisons were the airbenders.
It makes sense then that is why we have gotten to bending elements instead of energy, because the only thing the dragons could bend was fire. You know what I mean? Dragons breathe fire, the moon affects the tides. And so it makes sense how it started with energy, because maybe there were other animals that could have done different things. You know what I mean? Like maybe this animal produced lightning or something, like how the moon spirit does the moon. Like maybe there was like a lightning.
Animals do that in real life. Electric eels.
Maybe there was a lightning spirit, and maybe there was like, you know, mosquitoes were the bloodbenders, like all that sort of stuff, right? Like,
that's clever.
And so that's how I sort of think about it, is that the reason that we have gotten elements are because the main people that have passed on bending were like the moles. Like obviously they have to do with Earth, right? And so I would say that there's probably other animals that could have done other things like bend metal. I can't think of something in the top of my head, but
honestly, I think like the basic level of bending is the animals that bend it, and then like human ingenuity is what's like, okay, well, we can take it a step further with metal, with blood, with whatever else they come up with.
And I feel like that's where like bending the energy could come back to humans, if that makes sense. Like humans could learn to bend more than just the elements, or expand. Like that's how Toph expanded, right?
I think that's a power that like Aang alone, like the Avatar alone, should have, like, because you could also take away someone's ability to bend bend.
I wonder if that ability would pass on to Korra, because Aang remembers how to do it.
I was about to say you do see more of that in The Legend of Korra.
But I'm assuming like she'll have to learn it. Like I'm really interested in seeing Aang. Like
there's a lot of new shit, but there's so many satisfying callbacks. It's great.
Like seeing Aang and Korra. Like I see a lot of art of Aang, and he has like a thick like brown beard and stuff. I think his head is still shaved. Yeah, like I see fan art. I don't know if that's how he looks in Korra. Like if you see him when I'm gonna say when you see him, because I'm pretty sure that you'd fucking see him. You know.
I mean, like, you know, just like Roku was his guy.
Yeah, exactly, right? And so, yeah.
And Korra is the guy right at. Yeah, I think that's usually it. It's like whoever was the previous Avatar is the next one's immediate guy. Roku was the last one in the element line, so you know now it's water.
And I've always said, like, how can Korra exist if Aang fixes everything? But Aang doesn't even get close to starting to fix everything, right? Like the whole like Zuko makes a resolution. Like I resolve that we will fix this, but that doesn't mean that everything is fixed by the time that Korra comes around. And there are always going to be evil people in the world that like the good old days of genocide and racism and all that stuff,
I mean, at
right?
the very least, they ended the 100-year war, so it's like at the very least, like that.
They're on a good start, right?
Yeah, exactly. There's definitely progress, and obviously conflict just takes a different form, you know, in the new age. Yeah.
Does anybody else want to talk about anything else before we?
I'd rather talk about anything else.
What do you mean?
No, I'm just kidding.
The video games were terrible.
Oh yeah, the fucking video games were awful.
You can get 100 gamer score or like 100 1,000 trophy points or whatever.
You get all the achievements in like 2 minutes.
Yeah, it's an insane, terrible. I never finished it.
Yeah, no one ever gets past the first level.
One day you'll watch the M. Night Shyamalan movie and you'll know what true pain feels like.
Okay, well let me ask you guys this before we move on to shipping. Do you hope that they change stuff in the live action version? Because I talked to Arnold about this, and I feel like that, you know, even though nothing can really live up to animation, like live action wise, this is their second chance without fucking M. Night Shyamalan movies and all that stuff. Like, this is their second chance to do the things that they wanted to do, and if they wanted to have a fourth season, you know what I'm saying? Like, are you guys interested in seeing them change things?
is it just a live action movie or is it a live action series?
It's a TV show.
Oh, okay. I had no idea about that. Well, yeah, like first off, M. Night Shyamalan tried to fucking jam pack the entire like first season into like a 2-hour movie. So that was already his first fuck up. I think if it's a TV series, maybe. I still think like the live action is just gonna ruin a lot of things unless they heavily like CGI, like there's a lot of like production quality to make up for the fact of like those fictional things that you really can't replicate in real life.
Yeah.
Honestly, I feel like if that happens, like if they do the things that they didn't get to do, I feel like a lot of people will be upset that it wasn't in the animation to begin with, since the animation is already like perfect. Another thing too, for me personally, so whether it's a manga, an anime, or a movie, I think that there is some validity in having each one not be a direct carbon copy of the other, because it kind of just because then at that point it's like, well, that's all about preference. Would you rather read it? Would you rather watch it? Or would you rather read the manga? Would you rather watch the long running show? Or would you rather watch a condensed 2-hour version of it? And I always used to get I always get like a little frustrated when I see like the most obvious example is probably like the Death Note movie.
Yeah.
People immediately like tear it apart because it's like it's not the anime, but it's like the anime's the anime.
Yeah.
That's its thing. It like I just don't understand why people want the same thing in different forms.
Yeah.
But they want everything to be the exact same thing.
Like Hunter and I did a video
nothing different
about the Death Note thing, and like people dragged us for it, and so I feel like that is part of the problem. Like, let them try new things with this old property. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And so for this TV series, I would be open for them to try as many new things as possible, because it's not more of the same. It's not the same thing that you're going to be talking about with the animation 10 years from now. It's, if anything, it'll spark different, like new conversations or comparisons or, something like that. The only thing that I think it will get dragged for is that it's live.
Mm-hmm.
I think that it should change things, but nothing like dramatic. Like, it keeps the same relative beats.
Yeah, the same major beats.
Yeah, and just the in-between stuff they change. They don't have to remake every episode. They can remake some of them, but I think they should strike on and try to do new and interesting things.
Yeah, like I still want it to be Aang, not Yang. Like I want it to be like Yeah, oh fuck me, dude. I can't believe you just said that.
So I guess now it is time for my
time to have your monologue.
My monologue. No. Aang and Katara was very vanilla and it was cute, but it's the standard kid show thing where it's like, oh, the boy and the girl, they get together. Like, that's how it felt. And I understand there was some thought put into their relationship. I get it.
The kids, by the way.
I know. Like, there was clearly, I don't know, I feel like from the very beginning that was the intention, but they did make it work. Right? Like, I was excited when I saw them kiss. I accepted it. And somebody even said that in my reaction. They were like, I really respect how Cal ships Zuko and Katara, but she can still get excited about the Aang and Katara moments. Because, that it is what it is at the end of the day, right? However, for a more adult show, right, for the live action, I am kind of hoping that they do Katara and Zuko, okay?
There would be riots.
And I don't want to get too much into my reasoning why, because I do want to make another video, but there's just so many layers. Like, both of them losing their mom, right? Like, that's sort of the common thing that they have when they're in the cave. The scene in the cave,
Well, they can join anybody else.
Them getting the revenge, like, together. Them, like, fighting against Azula. Like, all of those, I see those as, like, shipping foundations.
The thing for that is, all of that stuff would have to be consistent as well. If you're going to change something like, oh, these two are together, you can't keep everything. Like, the thing that you're doing right now is, like, you're applying everything that the animation does.
I know. I'm just talking about the ship as a ship, not necessarily, like, the live action thing. Like,
Oh, okay.
But those are the scenes in the anime, in the show, which I'm like, that is the foundation for why people like this. And I think it's also like the enemies to lovers thing, right? Like obviously like Katara's like, hey, you know, one wrong move and I'll end your fucking destiny. Like that is such a strong line from her, right? And like their entire like relationship I feel like would be so complex and so interesting because they have so much to bond over. It's the fire and water thing. Katara likes the bad boys. And I feel like Katara is a better character than May, so I feel like that's also part of it. I just feel like the ship is just so good. I love Zuko and Katara.
I like May and Zuko together, though. I think they work well.
Yeah.
I think like Zuko's like disillusionment with his place and his family and the Fire Nation, and May's kind of being smarter and more worldly than him, but just being disillusioned as a character trait. I think that is really cute and it works really well with one another. It's not as like big picture as Katara and Zuko is, and I think maybe that's what attracts you to it, is that it's like a big picture romance, whereas May and Zuko is kind of a background thing.
I think it's just like there's so many good parallels and foils to them. Like it's like it's the same reason why, again, sorry to talk about Ruby, but this is why people like Cinder and Winter, because you have the fire and the ice and you have all those comparisons, right? You have the elite and then you have like, you know, I guess in that case, like the elite would be Zuko and then, you know, Katara would be Katara, obviously. Like it's why people like those sorts of ships like that. Like there's just that dynamic of fire and water and the connection that they have over their mom, and I just feel like that they really help each other grow. And at the very end of the day, like Katara is what Katara is who Zuko needs to convince the most, and I think Katara changes a lot because of Zuko and her field trip with Zuko, and then at the very end they are fighting together, and I think it was very pointed for them to sort of do that together. Like Katara wasn't with Aang, she was with Zuko, you know, and I really, really like that. The only thing I thought was really funny is in the Ember Islands play, Katara is in love with Zuko, and I feel like they were making fun of the audience or something, right?
Yeah,
and, for sure. And so, I don't know, I just thought that was a really funny thing, but I will make my dissertation later, but I really, really like the ship. I think there's a lot of chemistry between them. I know, Arnold, you don't really care about shipping, but
yeah, I mean, it's like, I can understand, like, all the points that you made are valid. I also do think that May and Zuko, they, you know, I mean, like, they come from the same background. That's, you know, it's like, I don't want to say it's like the girl next door kind of thing, but it's like, it's
she had a crush
on
him too. Like, I think that's the thing.
So there's that as well, and
childhood friends.
You know, I just think that they also do have some. Their chemistry is really great too. They're both very mature, somewhat stubborn, in their own ways, and they butt heads, and I think that makes for, you know, good chemistry with them as the show went on, until they officially were like, okay, maybe we are good for each other, maybe we can, you know, this can work. And I think that's all valid for Katara and Zuko as well, especially because you see those moments that are like, okay, well, that, you know, can this relationship be just as valid? But yeah, I do think it is to an extent, like, you know, the main character gets the girl, and I still think it works out, especially if or when you watch Korra. I don't think that there's any point that you're going to be like, man, I wish this other thing happened instead, you know? But
I guess, like, because there's, I guess it's hard to explain, but there's a lot of good ships, and I feel like it's just because all the characters just exist so well. You know what I mean? Sokka and Suki, I will fully support that, but, like, before Suki came back, there was a little bit, I think Hunter probably remembers, where I was shipping Sokka and Toph, and Hunter talked about in the comics how Toph has a bunch of kids, and you don't know who the father is, and it could possibly have been Sokka, but then Sokka's with Suki. So, my mind, here's what I think happened, okay? I think...
It's in Korra she has 2 kids.
Right. Yep. I think that Sokka was with Suki, I think that Aang was with Katara, and I think Toph and Zuko got together eventually. even though May, like, I feel like if anyone was the dad, I feel like it would be Zuko. And my reasoning for that is because I realized earlier when Toph was trying to give Zuko her tragic backstory that they have a lot of similarities of not being accepted by their parents and their sort of royal upbringing. And Zuko and Toph have a very similar attitude. Like, Toph definitely has more bluntness, but you have those moments from Zuko, like, this isn't a children's story, Aang, like, all of those sort of lines from him. And like, yeah, that's nice. Like, when he talks about, like, oh, you don't want revenge, you think forgiveness. Well, forgiveness is nice, but this is the real world, buddy. Like, they both have that very similar attitude, and how Toph teaches Aang bending is very similar to how Zuko taught Aang bending and all that stuff. So, I don't know. It's just, like, by the end of the show, I was sort of like, I kind of ship Zuko and Toph. Like, obviously when they're adults, but, you know.
I wonder if, because I'm trying to think right now, and I don't really know. I don't know if some of the characters even, like, stay together throughout their lifetimes.
Oh, boy.
You see Zuko's kids. You know that Katara and Aang had children in Korra. Sokka, you see Sokka, but it's never clear. Sokka, I don't think has kids.
Yeah, but do you know who
made
the mother of Zuko's kids are?
Presumably May, but you can never be entirely sure.
You can never be too sure. That's all I'm saying. All right, we'll find out. But
Well,
yeah,
it'd be weird if
So,
both
but
of
what
them
if
had
it was
kids
like
separately. That's weird.
Yeah, he had legitimate kids and he had bastards because he was a king. They tend to do
you
that.
know what happens, and so I would say that is my definitive, like, ship sheet, like, for the very end of the show. You know what I mean? Like, Katara with Aang, Sokka and Suki got together. Maybe Sokka fucked around with Toph a little bit. I don't know. Zuko obviously ended up with May.
It can't be some random person.
But then
can't be some guy in her life.
But then Zuko goes with
You have to
Toph.
fall in love with the people you meet when you're 16, according to Cal.
Anyway, so yeah, I really think there's a lot of shipping potential with the show, and I as much as I enjoy Zuko and Katara, there are a lot of other ships that exist and like I feel like are really good because a lot of them have common ground, and I feel like that's really interesting. Again, like Toph and Zuko's like family backgrounds are really similar, and I never really thought about that before. So yeah, I think with that, some final thoughts maybe.
You're like a thesis on Avatar.
Yeah. So obviously you guys love I think we're all in agreement, like Avatar's a fucking masterpiece. I'm gonna be sad that it's over.
You got Korra whenever you're ready for it.
I know. I can't think of anything like really, really wrong
They're
with
way
the show.
shorter. The episodes are way short. I think they're 12 episodes a season. So
Yeah.
you can watch those in like a month.
I have written a 2,000-word essay about Avatar, and that's true. And I got grades for it, and the grades were good. In university, I've made.
You probably converted some professors to that show.
I hope I did. I've made like success out of this show. I've spun this into gold.
So yeah, I guess that's it. I just love Avatar. I'm glad to get all my feelings out about it. I'm glad that I talked to you guys just because.
I've never really gotten the chance to talk about Avatar because like Avatar came out in a time. That sounds so fucking old saying that, by the way. Jesus.
Fucking old.
Premiered in 2005. That's 15 years ago.
Yeah, true. I mean, I was literally 15. I wasn't even in high school yet. But well, I think I was like a freshman. But
I just remembered how much older you are than I. Fucking hell! I was in it. I was like what, 7? Oh Jesus.
Yeah, but I didn't have the internet or like social media or like Twitter or YouTube or anything like that to really talk about the things that I liked. I really just had me and my siblings, and if I was lucky, kids at school who also watched the same things I did. Mm-hmm. So like Avatar was always something that I just watched. I was like, oh, that's cool. That's awesome. Can't wait for next week's episode. So like, and the same thing with like, again, we did Full Metal's discussion prior, but like even with Full Metal, like I watched that by myself. Like I watched on and off episodes with my brother, but I watched all of it mostly by myself, and it was really just something I had to just internalize and be like, did I think that was a good show? What were things that I liked about it?
Yeah.
I had to think for myself. It was exhausting.
Yeah.
Well, you have no one to bounce off of. Like, that's why you guys are here, because I was like, I need someone to bounce off all my ideas. And, like, I feel like as you get older, you tend to just look at things differently. Like, for me, like, Avatar is very complex when it comes to all the politics and the war and, you know, the messages that it sends. Like, it's very clearly, hey, choose peace, choose being good, you know, but, like, all the concepts it tackles with, I don't know if I would appreciate them as much as a kid as I do now, like, watching. You know what I mean? Sure. Obviously, I don't have that point of reference because I never saw it before, but, you know, you can have a lot of adult conversations about Avatar, about, like, we already talked about, like, the family dynamics, like, the abuse that some of the kids went through. Like, there's just a lot there that is very, like, adult conversation time, and you wouldn't think of it in a kid's show, but it's there. And as we get older, you know, we'll probably have a lot of thoughts about it. I feel like there's a reason why people still talk about the show 10 years later, and why there's, you know, YouTube videos brand new, like My Defense of Azula and, like, the psychology of Azula, and just talking about these characters because they grow with you. They grow as you get older, right?
It's super weird that my favorite show at 7 is the same at 21.
Yeah.
Like, that shouldn't be. Normally that wouldn't happen, but
that's timeless right there.
It is.
It's incredibly good, and it stays incredibly good into adulthood. Or whatever I am right now.
I agree. So yeah, thank you guys for joining me.
Yep, it's been fun.
It's been really, really fun. I guess we have to let go and say goodbye. I posted this on Twitter. I'm like, it's all downhill from here. With, you know, the shows that we're gonna watch.
You watched 3 of, like, the most widely regarded.
I told her that. I was like, you just watched the best. Like, you watch, like, obviously she saw Code Geass, Avatar, The Last Airbender. I'm like,
it can't get any better. Like,
it can't get any better than that.
Like, it's time for video games for me, I guess. Like, I've seen all the TV shows.
Bioshock and Mass Effect. After that, it's like, does anything else matter? Like, what's the point of doing anything else?
Damn. But yeah, I hope that you guys enjoyed. Thank you guys for joining us. You can find Arnold on Murder of Birds. You can find Hunter here, hopefully someday. If you guys are watching this in August, hopefully Ontario has, you know, gotten better. Maybe, I don't know, but hopefully, I guarantee that Hunter and I will be together for Ruby, like when Ruby comes back, if nothing else, right? I don't know about the next couple months. I don't think that we're gonna fully go back to normal by the time the summer hits, but
like, it's partially opening up.
We don't know. You never know, Hunter. That's the problem, is that we never know. But yeah.
Keep changing the days, the dates, and all that.
But we will see you guys when we see you guys. I hope that you guys enjoyed. Bye, guys.
Yep. Bye.